every time you touch a plant, you're a vector for a pathogen, bacteria, fungi, potentially plant insects to get transferred to those plants. So you want to be really careful about only touching a plant if you really have to. And the fewer times you can touch a plant going all the way through flower, usually the better off you're going to be. And you should work backwards from that sort of goal and be like, how can we fill up the canopy with the right density of flower sites and the right penetration while doing the fewest possible plant touches all the way through?
Touch points. It's one of the most acknowledged labor aspects of growing traditional crops outside of cannabis. There's always the goal of how can you reduce the number of manual touch points and manual steps in the process, because every one of those is additional labor. When it comes to defoliating and pruning, you want to be efficient. You want to be able to get through the zone. You want to be able to track man hours to the labor associated to then get that into your actual cogs for that batch. And that's one of the most labor intensive cultural techniques of growing the crop out of all of them is pruning and the hands-on time you have to spend during those tasks.
I think it's a useful exercise for facilities to actually count through how many planned plant touches they might have once a plant gets, say, planted in veg. An example of that would be something like this. Say you're planting into a 1 gallon cocoa pot. You plant in there, that's one plant touch. The next plant touch is probably going to be when that plant's getting moved into flower, assuming you're not doing any topping or pruning. Gets moved into flower, it gets jostled around a little bit. It's not a lot of manipulation. After that, plants are going to be touched again, usually when they're going through the trellis. They might have a couple of opportunities where branches get spread out to even out the canopy. And then you're going to have your major pruning and defoliation event sometime, say around 3 weeks into flower. I think we're at what? So we're at 1, 2, 3, that's 4. Your next major plant touch is probably not going to be until another defoliation. Your 5th plant touch, say around week 7, you strategically come through, remove more leaves in preparation for harvest and to open up light to the bud sites. And then your last one would be maybe 6 at harvest. I think that's a good goal for people. An exercise is walk through that and be like, all right, here's how many plant touches we have. If we can shoot for 6, that's pretty good. Could potentially get it down less. But I think the feeling I have from watching a lot of facilities that it's much, much more. And I recommend that people go through, do this little exercise for themselves and think about how many planned times is somebody going to go through and manipulate a plant over its life cycle. And if you're at like 10, well, there's room for improvement there.
Yeah, you should almost ask yourself why. Like what are you justifying as a necessary plant touch that could potentially be avoided if you thought about doing something more efficiently prior to that, right? I think a lot of it, though, too, is like appropriate staffing and labor scheduling for it. I mean, you want to get through these events in a scheduled period of time and usually not allow these tasks to drag on for days and days and days. And don't get me wrong, depending on the economy of scale based on the size of the farm and the size of the operation is going to dictate a lot of that. But really associating the right number of staff to those tasks, whether it's transplanting, whether it's transition from veg to flower, trellis. Are you going to have your trellis stretched and spread on the racks prior to loading those plants in and just have it up high so all your team has to do is come in and drop it? Or are you actually going to go through and roll it out and cut it and tighten it and then add the next layers after the plants have been in there? You know, there's different ways of kind of gaining those efficiencies. And then you think about like, well, IPM, whether you're doing preventative or curative sprays, or if you're doing preventative biological releases, that's not really a touch point on the plant because you're going to have maybe 2-3 people, depending on the size, go and fulfill those tasks, right? It's not like every single plant is getting a sachet put on it, right? I mean, typically, if they're doing it right, they're doing it with the appropriate amount of square footage that a sachet should cover. I have seen it the opposite way, though, where you go in there and you've got 3 different sachets on every single plant and a covert rep that's like so stoked about his account because they're way overusing the products. But
he's getting those commission checks.
Yeah, should have that so well thought out, so far ahead of even cutting the clones for that zone and that batch and that rotational period. But it takes time also. You know, you get a new facility underway, you're staffing up, you get things rolling. It's your first time growing new varieties. Kind of got to go through all those motions to really collect the data you need to know how well you did or didn't perform some of those tasks for the next time around to be more efficient. I like the count you're at. I think that that 6 to 8 touch points is probably that sweet spot somewhere in there. You might have an extra touch point if you're transplanting, but then like 2 days later, you're going back and actually attaching tags to those plants, right? Depending on the state, depending how you're prepping your tagging system for the compliance aspect of it.
I think it's just a good rule of thumb for people to think about this when they think about their methods and be like, okay, so given two options here, maybe somebody's considering vegging in a 4-inch by 4-inch cube and then going on top of a slab or on top of cocoa versus planting directly into a 1-gallon cocoa bag. And there's good reasons why you might do the first scenario. Say your veg space is limited and you can't fit all of the 1-gallon cocoa bags you need. You can only fit in 4-inch cubes. There's other good reasons. But if you can fit in all of the 1-gallon bags and you can just transplant directly into them and veg in those bags and not have to do a secondary transplant, you've saved yourself a plant touch, a whole bunch of labor, another potential disease vector. And I think that sort of thinking could be applied more frequently and people would have good results, just like thinking through their methods in that context and just weighing things in the balance. Sometimes doing more isn't better. And it's looking at where can you do less?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be such an industry standard. It seemed like 10 years ago for people to go from a 4-inch pot to a 1-gallon, or, from a clone plug to a 4-inch pot, 4-inch to a 1-gallon, 1-gallon to a 5-gallon or 7-gallon or something like that, and then even take it one step further and transplant that to like a 25 or a 30 or whatever to go into a field. And now it's like the opposite, right? It's the thoughts and considerations of touch points and labor savings and being able to irrigate appropriately when you go into your final container size from your propagation cube, whether it's an AOK plug or a sphagnum cube or whatever it is, right? But yeah, definitely very, very important things to consider. There was a facility in Florida that was like just a standard cut flower, old school nursery greenhouse, no benches, plants on the ground, back-breaking labor of transplanting. And it was like, hey, well, you're trying to end up in a 7-gallon pot. Just transplant a clone into a 7-gallon pot, water it at a high EC, and then let it dry back. And all of a sudden, it's like no transplanting. They're letting it dry back for 12 days, 14 days before it even needs that second watering event. And it's like, we don't know what to do. We have nothing to do. It's like, well, because you're not hand watering thousands of 4-inch pots and then 1-gallons that need water every day. You got through your transplant so much faster. Now everybody goes and helps either harvest or just trimming or whatever the case is, right? And they just gained all this labor efficiency. Yeah,
that's
right.
Cleaning all that labor is just cleaning and maintaining equipment. How can we keep our dehumidifiers
get a boom lift and like
breaking down?
Yeah.